Hello, my lovelies. It's time to read another chapter, and this one's called A Costly Mistake. In the morning, Eragon and Brom retrieved their saddlebags from the stable and prepared to depart. Jode greeted Brom while Helen watched from the doorway. With grave looks, the two men clasped hands. "I'll miss you, old man," said Jode. "And you I," said Brom thickly. He bowed his white head and then turned to Helen. "Thank you for your hospitality. It was most gracious." Her face reddened. Eragon thought she was going to slap him. Brom continued unperturbed. "You have a good husband. Take care of him. There are few men as brave and as determined as he is, but even he cannot weather difficult times without support from those he loves." He bowed again and said gently, "Only a suggestion, dear lady." Eragon watched as indignation and hurt crossed to Helen's face. Her eyes flashed as she shut the door brusquely. Sighing, Jode ran his fingers through his hair. Eragon thanked him for all his help, then mounted Caddock. With the last farewell said, he and Brom departed. At Tyrm's south gate, the guards let them through without a second glance. As they rode under the giant outer wall, Eragon saw movement in a shadow. Solemnbum was crouched on the ground, tail twitching. The werecat followed them with inscrutable eyes. As the city receded into a distance, Eragon asked, "What are werecats?" Brom looked surprised at the question. "Why the sudden curiosity? I heard someone mention them in Tyrm. They're not real, are they?" said Eragon, pretending ignorance. "They are quite real. During the Riders' Years of Glory, they were as renowned as the dragons. Kings and elves kept them as companions, yet the werecats were free to do what they chose. Very little has ever been known about them. I'm afraid that their race has become rather scarce recently." "Could they use magic?" asked Eragon. "No one's sure, but they could certainly do unusual things. They always seemed to know what was going on, and somehow or another managed to get themselves involved." Brom pulled his head up to block a chill wind. "What's Helgrind?" asked Eragon after a moment's thought. "You'll see when we get to Drosleona." When Tyrm was out of sight, Eragon reached out with his mind and called, "Saphira!" The force of his mental shout was so strong that Caddock flicked his ears in annoyance. Saphira answered and sped toward them with all of her strength. Eragon and Brom watched as a dark blur rushed from a cloud, then heard a dull roar as Saphira's wings flared open. The sun shone behind the thin membranes, turning them translucent and silhouetting the dark veins. She landed with a blast of air. Eragon tossed Caddock's reins to Brom. "I'll join you for lunch." Brom nodded, but seemed preoccupied. "Have a good time," he said, then looked at Saphira and smiled. "It's good to see you again. And you too." Eragon hopped onto Saphira's shoulders and held on tightly as she bounded upward. With the wind at her tail, Saphira sliced through the air. "Hold on," she warned Eragon, and letting out a wild bugle, she soared in a great loop. Eragon yelled with excitement as he flung his arms in the air, holding on only with his legs. "I didn't know I could stay on while you did that without being strapped into the saddle," he said, grinning fiercely. "Neither did I," admitted Saphira, laughing in her peculiar way. Eragon hugged her tightly, and they flew a level path, masters of the sky. By noon, his legs were sore from riding bareback, and his hands and face were numb from the cold air. Saphira's scales were always warm to the touch, but she could not keep him from getting chilled. When they landed for lunch, he buried his hands in his clothes and found a warm, sunny place to sit. As he and Brom ate, Eragon asked Saphira, "Do you mind if I ride Caddock?" He had decided to question Brom further about his past. "No, but tell me what he says." Eragon was not surprised that Saphira knew his plans. It was nearly impossible to hide anything from her when they were mentally linked. When they finished eating, she flew away as he joined Brom on the trail. After a time, Eragon slowed Caddock and said, "I need to talk to you. I wanted to do it when we first arrived in Tyrm, but I decided to wait until now." "About what?" asked Brom. Eragon paused. "There's a lot going on that I don't understand. For instance, who are your friends, and why were you hiding in Carvajal? I trust you with my life, which is why I'm still traveling with you, but I need to know more about who you are and what you are doing. What did you steal in Gilead, and what is the Tuatha Duorathrim that you're taking me through? I think that after all that's happened, I deserve an explanation." "You eavesdropped on us." "Only once," said Eragon. "I see that you have yet to learn proper manners," said Brom grimly, tugging on his beard. "What makes you think that this concerns you?" "Nothing, really," said Eragon, shrugging. "Just that it's an odd coincidence that you happened to be hiding in Carvajal when I found Saphira's egg, and that you also know so much dragon lore. The more I think about it, the less likely it seems. There were other clues that I mostly ignored, but they're obvious now that I look back, like how you knew of the Razak in the first place, and why they ran away when you approached. And I can't help but wonder if you had something to do with the appearance of Saphira's egg. There's a lot you haven't told us, and Saphira and I can't afford to ignore anything that might be dangerous." Dark lines appeared on Brom's forehead as he reined Snowfire to a halt. "You won't wait?" he asked. Eragon shook his head maliciously. Brom sighed. "This wouldn't be a problem if you weren't so suspicious, but I suppose that you wouldn't be worth my time if you were otherwise." Eragon was unsure if he should take that as a compliment. Brom lit his pipe and slowly blew a plume of smoke into the air. I'll tell you, he said, but you have to understand that I cannot reveal everything. Eragon started to protest, but Brom cut him off. It's not out of desire to withhold information, but because I won't give away secrets that aren't mine. There are other stories woven in with this narrative. You'll have to talk with the others involved to find out the rest. Very well. Explain what you can, said Eragon. Are you sure? Asked Brom. There are reasons for my secretiveness. I've tried to protect you by shielding you from forces that would tear you apart. Once you know of them and their purposes, you'll never have the chance to live quietly. You will have to choose sides and make a stand. Do you really want to know? I cannot live my life in ignorance, said Eragon quietly. A worthy goal. Very well. There is a war raging in Alagasia between the Varden and the Empire. Their conflict, however, reaches far beyond any incidental armed clashes. They are locked in a titanic power struggle centered around you. Me? Said Eragon, disbelieving. That's impossible. I don't have anything to do with either of them. Not yet, said Brom, but your very existence is the focus of their battles. The Varden and the Empire aren't fighting to control this land or its people. Their goal is to control the next generation of riders, of whom you are the first. Whoever controls these riders will become the undisputed master of Alagasia. Eragon tried to absorb Brom's statements. It seemed incomprehensible that so many people would be interested in him in Saphira. No one besides Brom had thought that he was that important. The whole concept of the Empire and Varden fighting over him was too abstract for him to grasp fully. Objections quickly formed in his mind. But all the riders were killed except for this Forsworn, who joined Galbatorix. As far as I know, even those are now dead. And you told me in Carvajal that no one knows if there are still dragons in Alagasia. I lied about the dragons, said Brom flatly. Even though the riders are gone, there are still 3 dragon eggs left, all of them in Galbatorix's possession. Actually, there are only 2 now since Saphira hatched. The king salvaged the 3 during his last great battle with the riders. So there may soon be 2 new riders, both of them loyal to the king, said Eragon, with a sinking feeling. Exactly, said Brom. There is a deadly race in progress. Galbatorix is desperately trying to find the people for whom his eggs will hatch, while the Varden are employing every means to kill his candidates or steal the eggs. But where did Saphira's egg come from? How could anyone have gotten it away from the king? And why do you know all of this? Said Eragon, bewildered. So many questions, laughed Brom bitterly. There is another chapter to all this, one that took place long before you were born. Back then I was a bit younger, though perhaps not as wise. I hated the Empire, for reasons I'll keep to myself, and I wanted to damage it in any way I could. My fervor led me to a scholar, Jode, who claimed to have discovered a book that showed a secret passageway into Galbatorix's castle. I eagerly brought Jode to the Varden, who are my friends, and they arranged to have the eggs stolen. The Varden? However, something went amiss, and our thief only got 1 egg. For some reason, he fled with it and didn't return to the Varden. When he wasn't found, Jode and I were sent to bring him and the egg back. Brom's eyes grew distant, and he spoke in a curious voice. That was the start of one of the greatest searches in history. We raced against the Razak, and Morzan, last of the Forsworn and the king's finest servant. Morzan, interrupted Eragon, but he was the one who betrayed the riders to Galbatorix. And that happened so long ago. Morzan must have been ancient. It disturbed him to be reminded of how long riders lived. So? Asked Brom, raising an eyebrow. Yes, he was old, but strong and cruel. He was one of the king's first followers and by far his most loyal. As there had been blood between us before, the hunt for the egg turned into a personal battle. When it was located in Gilead, I rushed there and fought Morzan for possession. It was a terrible contest, but in the end I slew him. During the conflict, I was separated from Jode. There was no time to search for him, so I took the egg and bore it to the Varden, who asked me to train whomever became the new rider. I agreed and decided to hide in Carvajal, which I had been to several times before, until the Varden contacted me. I was never summoned. Then how did Saphira's egg appear in the spine? Was another one stolen from the king? Asked Eragon. Brom grunted. Small chance of that. He has the remaining 2 guarded so thoroughly that it would be suicide to try and steal them. No, Saphira was taken from the Varden, and I think I know how. To protect the egg, its guardian must have tried to send it to me with magic. The Varden haven't contacted me to explain how they lost the egg, so I suspect that their runners were incepted by the Empire, and the Razak were sent in their place. I'm sure they were quite eager to find me, as I've managed to foil many of their plans. Then the Razak didn't know about me when they arrived in Carvajal, said Eragon with wonder. That's right, replied Brom. If that ass Sloane had kept his mouth shut, they might not have found out about you. Events could have turned out quite differently. In a way, I have you to thank for my life. If the Razak hadn't become so preoccupied with you, they might have caught me unawares, and that would have been the end of Brom the storyteller. The only reason they ran was because I'm stronger than the 2 of them, especially during the day. They must have planned to drug me during the night, then question me about the egg. You sent a message to the Varden telling them about me? Yes. I'm sure they'll want me to bring you to them as soon as possible. But you're not going to, are you? Brom shook his head. No, I'm not. Why not? Being with the Varden must be safer than chasing after the Razak, especially for a new rider. Brom snorted and looked at Eragon with fondness. The Varden are dangerous people. If we go to them, you will be entangled in their politics and machinations. Their leaders may send you on missions just to make a point, even though you might not be strong enough for them. I want you to be well prepared before you go anywhere near the Varden. At least while we pursue the Razak. I don't have to worry about someone poisoning your water. This is the lesser of two evils. And, he said with a smile, it keeps you happy while I train you. Tuatha Duodarithrim is just a stage in your instruction. I will help you find, and perhaps even kill, the Razak, for they are as much my enemies as yours. And then you will have to make a choice. And that would be? Asked Eragon warily. Whether to join the Varden, said Brom. If you kill the Razak, the only ways for you to escape Galbatorix's wrath will be to seek the Varden's protection, flee to Serta, or plead for the king's mercy and join his forces. Even if you don't kill the Razak, you will still face this choice eventually. Eragon knew the best way to gain sanctuary might be to join the Varden, but he did not want to spend his entire life fighting the Empire like they did. He mulled over Brom's comments, trying to consider them from every angle. You still didn't explain how you know so much about dragons. No, I didn't, did I? Said Brom with a crooked smile. That will have to wait for another time. Why me? Eragon asked himself. What made him so special that he should become a writer? Did you ever meet my mother? He blurted. Brom looked grave. Yes, I did. What was she like? The old man sighed. She was full of dignity and pride, like Garrow. Ultimately, it was her downfall, but it was one of her greatest gifts nevertheless. She always helped the poor and the less fortunate, no matter what her situation. You knew her well? Asked Eragon, startled. Well enough to miss her when she was gone. As Caddoc plodded along, Eragon tried to recall when he had thought that Brom was just a scruffy old man who told stories. For the first time, Eragon understood how ignorant he had been. He told Saphira what he had learned. She was intrigued by Brom's revelations, but recoiled from the thought of being one of Galbatorix's possessions. At last, she said, Aren't you glad that you didn't stay in Carvajal? Think of all the interesting experiences you would have missed. Eragon groaned in mock distress. When they stopped for the day, Eragon searched for water while Brom made dinner. He rubbed his hands together for warmth as he walked in a large circle, listening for a creek or a spring. It was gloomy and damp between the trees. He found a stream a ways from the camp, then crouched on the bank and watched the water splash over the rocks, dipping in his fingertips. The icy mountain water swirled around his skin, numbing it. It doesn't care what happens to us or anyone else, thought Eragon. He shivered and stood. An unusual print on the opposing stream bank caught his attention. It was oddly shaped and very large. Curious, he jumped across the stream and onto a rock shelf. As he landed, his foot hit a patch of damp moss. He grabbed a branch for support, but it broke, and he thrust out his hand to break his fall. He felt his right wrist cracken as he hit the ground. Pain lanced up his arm. A steady stream of curses came out from behind his clenched teeth as he tried not to howl. Half blind with pain, he curled on the ground, cradling his arm. Eragon, came Saphira's alarmed cry. What happened? Broke my wrist. Did something stupid. Fell. I'm coming, said Saphira. No, I can make it back. Don't come. Tree's too close for wings. She sent him a brief image of her tearing the forest apart to get at him and then said, Hurry. Groaning, he staggered upright. The print was pressed deeply into the ground a few feet away. It was the mark of a heavy nail-studded boot. Eragon instantly remembered the tracks that had surrounded the pile of bodies in Yazawak. Urgle, he spat, wishing that Zarok was with him. He could not use his bow with only one hand. His head snapped up and he shouted with his mind, Saphira! Urgles! Keep Brom safe! Eragon leaped back over the stream and raced toward their camp, yanking out his hunting knife. He saw potential enemies behind every tree and bush. I hope there's only one Urgle. He burst into the camp, ducking as Saphira's tail swung overhead. Stop! It's me! He yelled. Oops, said Saphira. Her wings were folded in front of her chest like a wall. Oops, growled Eragon, running to her. You could have killed me! Where's Brom? I'm right here, snapped Brom's voice from behind Saphira's wings. Tell your crazy dragon to release me. She won't listen to me. Let him go, said Eragon, exasperated. Didn't you tell him? No, she said sheepishly. You just said to keep him safe. She lifted her wings and Brom stepped forward angrily. I found an Urgle footprint, and it's fresh. Brom immediately turned serious. Saddle the horses. We're leaving. He put out the fire, but Eragon did not move. What's wrong with your arm? My wrist is broken, he said, swaying. Brom cursed and saddled Caddoc for him. He helped Eragon onto the horse and said, We'll have to put a splint on your arm as soon as possible. Try not to move your wrist until then. He gripped the reins tightly with his left hand, while Brom said to Saphira, It's almost dark. You might as well fly right overhead. If Urgles show up, they'll think twice about attacking with you nearby. They'd better, or else they won't think again, remarked Saphira as she took off. The light was disappearing quickly, and the horses were tired, but they spurred them on without respite. Eragon's wrist, swollen and red, continued to throb. A mile from the camp, Brom halted. "Listen," he said. Eragon heard the faint call of a hunting horn behind them. As it fell silent, panic gripped him. "They must have found where we were," said Brom, "and probably Saphira's tracks. They will chase us now. It's not in their nature to let prey escape." Then two horns winded. They were closer. A chill ran through Eragon. "Our only chance is to run," said Brom. He raised his head to the sky, and his face blinked as he called Saphira. She rushed out of the night sky and landed. "Leave Caddock. Go with her. You'll be safer," commanded Brom. "What about you?" Eragon protested. "I'll be fine. Now go." Unable to muster the energy to argue, Eragon climbed onto Saphira while Brom lashed Snowfire and rode away with Caddock. Saphira flew after him, flapping above the galloping horses. Sorry about that. The mic died, so give me a second. Saphira flew after him, flapping above the galloping horses. Eragon clung to Saphira as best he could. He winced whenever her movements jostled his wrist. The horns blared nearby, bringing a fresh wave of terror. Brom crashed through the underbrush, forcing the horses to their limits. The horns trumpeted in unison close behind him, then were quiet. Minutes passed. "Where are the Urgles?" wondered Eragon. A horn sounded, this time in the distance. He sighed in relief, resting against Saphira's neck. While on the ground, Brom slowed his headlong rush. "That was close," said Eragon. "Yes, but we cannot stop until—" Saphira was interrupted as a horn blasted directly underneath them. Eragon jerked in surprise, and Brom resumed his frenzied retreat. Horned Urgles, shouting with coarse voices, barreled along the trail on horses, swiftly gaining ground. They were almost inside of Brom. The old man could not outrun him. "We have to do something!" exclaimed Eragon. "What?" "Land in front of the Urgles." "Are you crazy?" demanded Saphira. "Land! I know what I'm doing," said Eragon. "There isn't any time for anything else. They're going to overtake Brom." "Very well." Saphira pulled ahead of the Urgles, then turned, preparing to drop onto the trail. Eragon reached for his power and felt the familiar resistance in his mind that separated him from the magic. He did not try to breach it yet. A muscle twitched in his neck. As the Urgles pounded up the trail, he shouted, "Now!" Saphira abruptly folded her wings and dropped straight down from above the trees, landing on the trail in a spray of dirt and rocks. The Urgles shouted with alarm and yanked on their horses' reins. The animals went stiff-legged and collided into each other, but the Urgles quickly untangled themselves to face Saphira with bared weapons. Hate crossed their faces as they glared at her. There were 12 of them, all ugly, jeering brutes. Eragon wondered why they did not flee. He had thought that the sight of Saphira would frighten them. Why are they waiting? Are they going to attack us or not? He was shocked when the largest Urgle advanced and spat. "Our master wishes to speak with you, human." The monster spoke in deep, rolling gutturals. "It's a trap," warned Saphira before Eragon could say anything. "Don't listen to him." "At least let's find out what he has to say," he reasoned, curious, but extremely wary. "Who is your master?" he asked. The Urgle sneered. "His name does not deserve to be given to one as low as yourself. He rules the sky and holds dominance over the earth. You are no more than a stray ant to him, yet he has decreed that you shall be brought before him alive. Take heart that you have become worthy of such notice." "I'll never go with you, nor any of my enemies," declared Eragon, thinking of Yazuak. "Whether you serve Shade, Urgle, or some twisted fiend I've not heard of, I have no wish to parley with him." "That is a grave mistake," growled the Urgle, showing his fangs. "There is no way to escape him. Eventually you will stand before our master. If you resist, he will fill your days with agony." Eragon wondered who had the power to bring the Urgles under one banner. Was there a third great force loose in the land, along with the Empire and the Varden? "Keep your offer and tell your master that the crows can eat his entrails for all I care." Rage swept through the Urgles. Their leader howled, gnashing his teeth. "We'll drag you to him, then." He waved his arm, and the Urgles rushed at Saphira. Raising his right hand, Eragon barked, "Gerda! No!" cried Saphira, but it was too late. The monsters faltered as Eragon's palm glowed. Beams of light lanced from his hand, striking each of them in the gut. The Urgles were thrown through the air and smashed into trees, falling senseless to the ground. Fatigue suddenly drained Eragon of strength, and he tumbled off Saphira. His mind felt hazy and dull. As Saphira bent over him, he realized that he might have gone too far. The energy needed to lift and throw 12 Urgles was enormous. Fear engulfed him as he struggled to stay conscious. At the edge of his vision, he saw one of the Urgles stagger to his feet, sword in hand. Eragon tried to warn Saphira, but he was too weak. "No," he thought feebly. The Urgle crept toward Saphira until he was well past her tail, then raised his sword to strike her neck. "No!" Saphira whirled on the monster, roaring savagely. Her talons slashed with blinding speed. Blood spurted everywhere as the Urgle was rent in two. Saphira snapped her jaws together with finality and returned to Eragon. She gently wrapped her bloody claws around his torso, then growled and jumped into the air. The night blurred into a pain-filled streak. The hypnotic sound of Saphira's wings put him in a bleary trance. Up, down, up, down, up, down. When Saphira eventually landed, Eragon was dimly aware of Brahm talking with her. He could not understand what they said, but a decision must have been reached because Saphira took off again. His stupor yielded to sleep that covered him like a soft blanket. And that is the end of that chapter. Give me 1 second. I think we're just going to continue on. The next chapter is called Vision of Perfection. Eragon twisted under the blankets, reluctant to open his eyes. He dozed, then a fuzzy thought entered his mind. How did I get here? Confused, he pulled the blankets tighter and felt something hard on his right arm. He tried to move his wrist, but it zinged with pain. The Urgles! He bolted upright. He lay in a small clearing that was empty save a small campfire, heating a stew-filled pot. A squirrel chattered on a branch. His bow and quiver rested alongside the blankets. Attempting to stand made him grimace as his muscles were feeble and sore. There was a heavy splint on his bruised right arm. Where is everyone? He wondered forlornly. He tried to call Saphira, but to his alarm could not feel her. Ravenous hunger gripped him, so he ate the stew. Still hungry, he looked for the saddlebags to find a chunk of bread. Neither the saddlebags nor the horses were in the clearing. I'm sure there's a good reason for this, he thought, suppressing a surge of uneasiness. He wandered about the clearing, then returned to his blankets and rolled them up. Without anything better to do, he sat against a tree and watched the clouds overhead. Hours passed, but Brahm and Saphira did not show up. I hope nothing's wrong. As the afternoon dragged on, Eragon grew bored and started to explore the surrounding forest. When he became tired, he rested under a fir tree that leaned against a boulder with a bowl-shaped depression filled with clear dew water. Eragon stared at the water and thought about Brahm's instructions for scrying. Maybe I can see where Saphira is. Brahm said that scrying takes a lot of energy, but I'm stronger than he is. He breathed deeply and closed his eyes. In his mind, he formed a picture of Saphira, making it as lifelike as possible. It was more demanding than he expected. Then he said, Brahmer, Kopa, and gazed at the water. Its surface became completely flat, frozen by an invisible force. The reflections disappeared and the water became clear. On it shimmered an image of Saphira. Her surroundings were pure white, but Eragon could see that she was flying. Brahm sat on her back, beard streaming, sword on his knees. Eragon tiredly let the image fade. At least they're safe. He gave himself a few minutes to recuperate, then leaned back over the water. Roran, how are you? In his mind, he saw his cousin clearly. Impulsively, he drew upon the magic and uttered the words. The water grew still, and then an image formed on its surface. Roran appeared sitting on an invisible chair. Like Saphira, his surroundings were white. There were new lines on Roran's face. He looked more like Garrow than ever before. Eragon held the image in place as long as he could. Is Roran in Therinsford? He's certainly know where I've been. The strain of using magic had brought beads of sweat to his forehead. He sighed, and for a long time was content just to sit. Then an absurd notion struck him. What if I tried to scry something I created with my imagination or saw in a dream? He smiled. Perhaps I'd be shown what my own consciousness looks like. It was too tempting an idea to pass by. He knelt by the water once again. What shall I look for? He considered a few things, but discarded them all when he remembered his dream about the woman in the cell. After fixing the scene in his mind, he put the words and watched the water intently. He waited, but nothing happened. Disappointed, he was about to release the magic when inky blackness swirled across the water, covering the surface. The image of a lone candle flickered in the darkness, brightening to illuminate a stone cell. The woman from his dream was curled up on a cot in one corner. She lifted her head, dark hair falling back, and stared directly at Eragon. He froze, the force of her gaze keeping him in place. Chills ran up his spine as their eyes locked. Then the woman trembled and collapsed limply. The water cleared. Eragon rocked back on his heels, gasping. This can't be. She shouldn't be real. I only dreamed about her. How could she know I was looking at her? And how could I have scryed into a dungeon that I've never seen? He shook his head, wondering if any of his other dreams had been visions. The rhythmic thump of Saphira's wings interrupted his thoughts. He hurried back to the clearing, arriving just as Saphira landed. Brahm was on her back, as Eragon had seen, but his sword was now bloody. Brahm's face was contorted. The edges of his beard were stained red. What happened? Asked Eragon, afraid that he had been wounded. What happened? Roared the old man. I've been trying to clean up your mess. He slashed the air with the sword, flinging drops of blood along its arc. Do you know what you did with that little trick of yours? Do you? I stopped the Urgles from catching you, said Eragon, a pit forming in his stomach. Yes, growled Brahm, but that piece of magic nearly killed you. You've been sleeping for 2 days. There were 12 Urgles. 12! But that didn't stop you from trying to throw them all the way to Tyr, now did it? What were you thinking? Sending a rock through each of their heads would have been the smart thing to do, but no, you had to knock them unconscious so they could run away later. I spent the last 2 days trying to track them down. Even with Saphira, 3 escaped. I didn't want to kill them, said Eragon, feeling very small. It wasn't a problem in Yazuak. There was no choice then, and I couldn't control the magic. This time it just seemed extreme. Extreme? Cried Brom. It's not extreme when they wouldn't show you the same mercy. And why? Oh, why did you show yourself to them? You said that they had found Saphira's footprints. It didn't make any difference if they saw me, said Eragon defensively. Brom stabbed his sword into the dirt and snapped. I said they had probably found her tracks. We didn't know for certain. They might have believed they were chasing some stray travelers. But why would they think that now? After all, you landed right in front of them. And since you let them live, they're scrambling around the countryside with all sorts of fantastic tales. This might even get back to the Empire. He threw his hands up. You don't even deserve to be called a rider after this, boy. Brom yanked his sword out of the ground and stomped to the fire. He took a rag from inside his robe and angrily began to clean the blade. Eragon was stunned. He tried to ask Saphira for advice, but all she would say was, speak with Brom. Hesitantly, Eragon made his way to the fire and asked, would it help if I said I was sorry? Brom sighed and sheathed his sword. No, it wouldn't. Your feelings can't change what happened. He jabbed his finger at Eragon's chest. You made some very bad choices that could have dangerous repercussions, not the least of which is that you almost died. Died, Eragon! From now on, you're going to have to think. There's a reason why we're born with brains in our heads, not rocks. Eragon nodded, abashed. It's not as bad as you think, though. The girls already knew about me. They had orders to capture me. Astonishment widened Brom's eyes. He stuck his unlit pipe in his mouth. No, it's not as bad as I thought. It's worse. Saphira told me you talked with the Urgles, but she didn't mention this. The words tumbled out of Eragon's mouth as he quickly described the confrontation. So they have some sort of leader now, eh? Questioned Brom. Eragon nodded. And you just defied his wishes, insulted him, and attacked his men? Brom shook his head. I didn't think it could get any worse. If the Urgles had been killed, your rudeness would have gone unnoticed. But now it'll be impossible to ignore. Congratulations, you just made enemies with one of the most powerful beings in Alagasia. All right, I made a mistake, said Eragon sullenly. Yeah, you did, said Brom, eyes flashing. What has me worried, though, is who this Urgle leader is. Shivering, Eragon asked softly, what happens now? There was an uncomfortable pause. Your armor's going to take at least a couple of weeks to heal. This time would be well spent forging some sense into you. I suppose this is partially my fault. I've been teaching you how to do things, but not whether you should. It takes discretion, something you obviously lack. All the magic in Alagasia won't help if you don't know when to use it. But we're still going to Dras Leona, right? Asked Eragon. Brom rolled his eyes. Yes, we can keep looking for the Razak, but even if we find them, it won't do any good until you've healed. He began unsaddling Saphira. Are you well enough to ride? I think so. Good. Then we can still cover a few miles today. Where are Caddock and Snowfire? Brom pointed off to the side. Over there a ways. I picketed them where there was grass. Eragon prepared to leave, then followed Brom to the horses. Saphira said pointedly, if you had explained what you were planning to do, none of this would have happened. I would have told you it was a bad idea not to kill the Urgles. I only agreed to do what you asked because I assumed it was halfway reasonable. I don't want to talk about it. As you wish, she sniffed. As they rode, every bump and dip in the trail made Eragon grit his teeth in discomfort. If he had been alone, he would have stopped. With Brom there, he dared not complain. Also, Brom started drilling him with difficult scenarios involving Urgles, magic, and Saphira. The imagined fights were many and varied. Sometimes a shade or other dragons were included. Eragon discovered that it was possible to torture his body and mind at the same time. He got most of the questions wrong and became increasingly frustrated. When they stopped for the night, Brom grumbled shortly. It was a start. Eragon knew that he was disappointed. And that's the end. Until next time, loves.